conversation. So this week, I believe it's the first one of the new year that's taking place. So I wanted to just start by thanking CIFFC for inviting us. My name is Alex Adhere. I'm with the Prince Albert Grand Council Forestry, and CIFFC. I believe this started almost maybe a year ago or so at one of the CIFFC national conversations. It was the one with fire behavior analysts where the fire behavior analysts were invited to come speak and have a conversation about what was the thing that keeps them up at night. In the conversation, a lot of folks mentioned not knowing about being able to validate and verify the fuels that are on the ground. So within that, Robin, who's one of our guest speakers today, he mentioned in the chat, well, what have folks done to hire land users, people who know the land? It's important to involve Indigenous people in this conversation and include insights within fire management. So that's sort of how it got kind of started. And from there, we received an invite from Shalane and Heather to have a conversation. So that's where we're here from today. So we're from the Prince Albert Grand Council, which is a tribal council in northern Saskatchewan, represents or works for 12 First Nations and 28 reserve communities throughout the boreal forest area. And as you'll see, there's just a ton of First Nations expertise in wildfire. So with that, I'm going to introduce our panelists today. So we'll start with, so we have Senator Peter Beattie. Where are you, Senator?
I'm over here.
Ah, there you are.
Hi there.
How's it going? And so Senator and Walter are here from, are zooming in here from DeChambeau. So Senator Beattie was longtime chief and even longer than that councillor for Peter Ballantyne Cree Nation. Also been super involved in wildfire, was a firefighter, and has recently, or in 2017, spoke at Indigenous Services Standing Committee on Wildfire. For folks who've read the blueprint on wildfire, Senator Beattie's quoted in there. I don't know if you know that. But yes, he's also an ice fisherman, golfer, all the above.
Golfer, trapper, hunter.
Trapper, yeah. Good friends with my ex-mother-in-law and still talks to me, so all around good guy. Then we have Walter, who's sitting right beside him. So Walter's been a firefighter for, I believe, we spoke yesterday. I believe you said over 40 years you were a firefighter. So 20-some years.
40 years. 21 years with the department.
Exactly. And 20 years before that too, even, I believe you said.
At least, yeah.
At least. So Walter has a ton of knowledge from his experience as a firefighter. He's also been an elder advisor on the PAGC Wildfire Task Force, which started in 2018. So, and also if we have to worry about anyone getting in trouble for things that they say, besides me, it'll be Walter. So.
He always does. No. Never.
And lastly, we have Robin McLeod. So Robin has been a consultant with PAGC for quite some time, has been very involved in organizing the Prince Albert Grand Council Wildfire Task Force, as well as Robin oversees a lot of the different scientific and research projects that take place at the PAGC. So wealth of knowledge. And Robin and Senator Beattie actually recently were panelists at COP15 on woodland caribou and importance of Indigenous knowledge in woodland caribou conservation. And they were panelists, and I couldn't even get in the building. So there. And then lastly, we have as some support, we have Cliff Bittner. So Cliff is the director of PAGC Forestry, also a longtime firefighter, recently got a, was it 40 years of service award for your work both at
25
25 years. Okay, not 40. I'll just keep making it higher. 50 years. But yeah, so we're all here today and going to just talk a bit about some of the work that we've been doing and uh, how we think Indigenous nations should be more involved in fire response. Um, all right, so maybe we could just start with a little round robin. I know I did a small introduction, but maybe we'll start with Walter. So maybe you could just start by talking about how you've been involved in wildfire response, or even wildfire management over the years. And when did you get started, and how are you involved today?
Yeah, thanks, Alex. I don't know if I go through this whole thing, it might take me, you guys won't have time to speak there. But in an introduction, I started firefighting when I was about 16 or 17 years old in Laurent. Did that off and on between jobs. I'd fight fires for at least 20 years. And that was before I got hired by the provincial firefighting organization. And in 1984, I got hired till 2004, 21 years. And then during that time, I trained as a backburn team member. That's when you fight fire with fire. And Cliff Bittner was one of my guys that I worked with, and three names that I'd like to mention is Ira Elderkin and Kelly Sarchak. I worked with all of them and learned a lot from those guys. And then I was a member on the Tape 2 overhead team. I was a suppression boss, or what they call the operations chief now. And I got to make the calls how to fight that fire. Plus, I had to be considered the safety of the men on the ground, heavy equipment like cats, skidders, Nodwells working on the fire, and water bombers, helicopters, any other transport aircraft. That was my responsibility. So that was a lot, and I learned a lot during that time. And another thing, I was a first aid instructor for 3 years. That was a very good experience. I didn't get a chance to deliver a baby, then I would have got my wings. And that's how it works. You have to be able to deliver a baby. They teach you that. But the funny part is, I had 7 children. I never got into the delivery room once. I was too chicken. I couldn't. the nurse said, "Here's a gown. Put it on. Come in." I said, "I'll go in, but you're going to have to carry me out." So she said, "Well, never mind." Then she pushed me out. So other than that, it's pretty well it, Alex. Unless I can, you know. Export trips. I did 5 or 6 export trips to Ontario, 2 trips to BC, 1 trip as a liaison officer for 10th Saskatchewan Cruise, 1 trip to Alberta, north of Whitecourt. I've seen a lot of different styles of fighting fire. The one that I'm most impressed with is the one in Ontario. They don't wait for the initial attack crew to call a water bomber in for air support. They fired them out there at the same time, and we arrived at a fire pretty well the same time as the water bombers. And our fire boss there, his name was Dave Chappelle from Fort Francis, I think. He had to go to a spot fire across the bay, and the bombers were called into that spot fire. And he went way past it. He got lost, so I had to direct the bombers. And he got back to me, and he stood in front of me. He said, "You know, Wally," he said, I think I can go home because you know how to work." He said, "I can see you don't need my help." So that was quite a compliment. So I organized crews on fires even before I got hired by the provincial firefighting organization. And one time, I think Peter was at that fire, the Sadler Lake fire, or Daru fire, it's called. And 145 guys organized in the morning to get them out to work. That was a lot of fun. And some guys tried to hide. But I was smart. I'd make a circle all the way around the edge of the camp and find guys that are trying to sleep in. They called me the little general. I don't have much more else to say, but I did, I had some funny experiences. Sometimes there's one fire at Muskoka River. There was 4 cats sitting there and no operators. And one of the, I forget who it was, come up to me and said, "You know how to operate a cat?" I said, "Yeah, I do." Well,
Sorry, I was
start
downstairs.
this
putting
one
them on
up, make a fire garden. I finished the fire garden before the operators showed up.
there. Aw.
So,
I'm unfortunately on a
then I got-
webinar right now for the next hour, but we could maybe after that.
Hello?
I'm
Hello,
going
I
at 4, yeah.
I think someone's mic is on.
Fab Buchanan and Superstore.
Well, that's it for me, Alex. I think, I don't know if
That's good.
that's
Oh,
good.
that sounds good. Well, we'll pass it on to your brother now. So maybe Senator Beatty,
Sure,
same
yeah.
thing. Maybe you could just start by explaining a bit about how you've been involved in wildfire response or wildfire management over the years. I know you also have some issues with the term wildfire management, so maybe feel free to get into that as well if you want.
You guys are gonna have to unmute Peter and Walter.
Their privileges have been taken away. You can tell by just looking at their screen. They don't have a
Yeah.
mic.
Now can you hear me
There you
now? Yeah, Walter talked too long, so they took away our speaking privileges. Anyway, good afternoon to everyone. Thank Walter for the prayers this afternoon. And for me, it's basically the same thing. I started fighting fire when I was about 16 years old, on and off during the summers, whenever I could. And I got a lot of experience through that, just on-the-job experience. I ended up early on being a crew boss and kept doing that for probably 20 summers before I became a counselor for the Peter Ballantyne Cree Nation in 1993, right up to 2013 when I became chief of the band. We have a fairly big band. We've got 8 communities, covers most of Northeast Saskatchewan. So in that time as chief and as counselor, I've had a great opportunity to work with the fire suppression crews, and then later on to become fire management crews. Basically two different things. Suppression and management are 2 different terms, and they mean different things. But as far as that goes, we can get into that later. But I learned a lot as well from Cliff and Walter and other people that I worked with along the way regarding fires and how they act and what methods are used for suppression or for, I don't like the term management, but however, those are, and it's been probably the same amount of time as Walter being involved in that, close to 40 years. So I'll just leave it at that for now, and we'll move on with the call.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you, Senator Beatty. We'll pass it to Robin now.
Sorry, I wasn't listening. My name's Robin McLeod. I come from the small community of Stanley Mission on the Churchill River. I'm part of the Lac La Ronge Indian Band, the biggest band in the world.
No, it's not.
No, it's not.
I was waiting for
Here,
Peter's
here.
remark.
You're second.
Okay, I'll let it go this time. Thanks for the prayer, Walter, and thanks for your comments, Peter. It kind of sets the tone to what we need to talk about here. I was 15 when I first got the call. I didn't really get the call. We were me and my friend, his mom was the counselor for Stanley Mission, and we used to hang around and get in the way at the band office every day. So his mom called us and he says, boys, you guys are going out. You're going firefighting. And we both looked at each other and, we were both 15. We weren't old enough to go out. And that was our first reply. We're only 15. They won't take us. They will take you if I tell them to take you, she said. And sure enough, they did. And that was the late Rhoda Hartlot, Peter, that
Mhm.
that conscripted us. So we had to go. We were still in school. This was like late May. And we still had a couple of weeks of school left, but we still went. We went to the Mackenzie fire, just south of Laurent. That was our first time out, and somehow we were relegated to a camp where none of our people were. So they had to bring us to the to some of the people that were in charge, and we spent a couple hours in the dark with these guys, and then finally they came and got us and put us into the crew that we were supposed to be with, and the rest is history. It was a lot of first experience, and it was a lot of fun. The elders that were looking after me, I should say, they treated me well. They always wanted me to eat first in the mornings, so they came and woke me up and said they would say that the eggs are done, the wieners are done. They used to cook um, um, eggs with boiled eggs and boiled wieners, and they they knew how to call the eggs in Cree, but they couldn't come up with a name for the wieners. And that one old guy, which happens to be one of my uncles, said, we'll call them coxa. And that's what they're called now, wieners and coxa. If you guys can understand that's a Kringlish word created by the elders. So you get to learn a lot of things, not just about firefighting. You get to improve on your Cree. And we were put on a central camp where there's a whole bunch of people that stayed in that camp, and they've got flown out every day or driven out because we were right by the highway. And I think that's some of the stuff that I'm going to talk about later on, as the central camps. But I got involved in firefighting for, I would say, about 5 summers, and then I had in their interests, and one of those interests was getting a good education. So that's pretty well what I did. And half of the time I was chasing girls too, because that's part of our culture. So in a nutshell, that's who I am, and my work with forest fire. And one of the other things that I did for the Grand Council was I developed the task force on wildfires, and we did a lot of good things with the task force. We had the province sit in our task force, so anything that we wanted to address, we addressed with them, and they took it to their superiors, and we got a few things done. And I'll talk about that a little bit more after as well. So, in a nutshell, Alex, that's me.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that intro. I'm noticing here that we have another guest. Saul Carrier is here as well. Saul, he's been involved in a lot of cultural burning work, particularly on in the Saskatchewan River Delta. Would you like to just briefly discuss how you've been involved in fire response over the years as well?
Yeah, well, glad to be here for with all your distinguished guests, it looks like. And my, I guess my introduction to fire is that I'm a fire practitioner, and I start the fires. Looks like you guys put them out, but my interest in fire is, of course, to bring regrowth and to regenerate the marshes of the Cumberland Delta. And when we practiced our fire, it was during the spring of muskrat trapping events that occurred in this delta here. And so my I guess introduction to fire would be starting them and in the interest of promoting new growth and food for the animals that live along these marshes in our area here, and to really continue the practice that Indigenous people had throughout North America, and really who shaped North America with their knowledge of fire and how to use it in the manner that we've used it up here in the Cumberland Delta. And I'm very happy that I'm able to speak a little bit about it. I've never participated in putting out fires. I've only started them, and it's only in the interest of the ecology of the area that we're in. And many of the elders that have come before me have that. That's where we learned the practice of why we burn these marshes and why the regeneration of the plants is so important to our area here. And of course, we have lost that right since the 80s, and we've stopped that practice, but we are trying to restart that here, and so we can just showcase really how much Indigenous people really valued the land that and the resources that they had where they lived. And that's I guess where I'm coming from here in the Cumberland Delta. And I'm speaking to you from my trap line here along the shore of the Saskatchewan River, a place called Big Eddy. Anyway, that's me. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Solon. I'm glad you can make it. So as people see, and particularly in a region that's as big as the Prince Albert Grand Council, there's lots of different ways that Indigenous folks have been involved in fire response. So I have a question for both Walter and Saul, just to kind of get us going. Would you be able to talk a bit about what your role with fire response was like when you first started, and then how that sort of changed over the years? So whether that was with firefighting, Walter, or with lighting fires, Saul.
Well, I didn't really like fires until later on, where I got more experience. But right off the bat, I spent a summer and a half cleaning campgrounds, and then I was asked to change the headquarters to Pelican to fight fires. And my first job was to organize crews going out. I didn't really get to go out on the fire line. I wasn't initial attack. We had support crews, and I was one of the people that organized the support crews for stuff going out and how they wanted to fight the fire.
But you didn't do backfires.
Later on, I did backfires. I did some with Cliff up by the mine there at Lionel Lake, and some other. We used to do burning out of fuel at Sandy Bay until they told us to quit, pulled our license. Well, that's about it, though.
And Saul, I know you mentioned there was some sort of changes in your ability to light fires, I think particularly in the 80s. Would you want to sort of talk about how you learned to light fires and how that changed and what sort of the work you're doing it now would be.
Yeah. Yes. Like in the Cumberland Delta here, we were quite famous for producing a lot of muskrats in our area, and we had up to 850,000 muskrats harvested throughout this Cumberland Delta. And as part of my upbringing, I was brought up in the fire making, and my father was teaching me how to make fire from a very early age. So I'm almost been practicing it now for 60 years, I guess. And so it was a lifestyle that we had, that we were taught through my father, that we needed to burn the marsh so we can make it better for the animals that live in the marsh. And that's been where my introduction to the fire is it was part of our life, because my father trapped in the springs of each year that there was muskrat trapping, and it's been going on for a lot of years. And so that's how I was introduced to it. It was part of our lifestyle. And then in the 80s, we began to have the fire suppression, and we were stopped from burning. So we had to leave that practice for that since then, and we're trying to reintroduce it now because of the policies of the I guess the Saskatchewan environment, that they had, that you would be charged if you made a fire and it got away on you. And there was not much cases of that here, that it ever got away on people, because when we were burning, it was in the spring of each year. So there was always snow in the woods and so on. And we were quite good at it. So we knew the fuels, the type of fuels that cause big forest fires, because we've seen them, we lived near them. And our fires were more for to reciprocity, to give back to the land. So that's kind of in a nutshell, I guess.
Thanks, all. Yeah, I know both you and your partner Renee have talked about fire as prescription, as like providing medicine to the land, depending on where it's located, what the season is, how severe it's burning, all sorts of different things. So lots of always need to look at like the specificity of a particular fire when thinking of if it's good or bad, for sure. So I'll shift over to Senator Beatty. So you've been involved, obviously, Chief and Council for quite some time. You've heard lots of information from your community about different wildfire issues, and as well engaged in different levels of government. I'm just wondering, what are some of the main issues regarding wildfire that you've heard about from folks living in Peter Ballantyne?
Well, obviously, the main issue with wildfires is that when they get out of control and they come close to a community, then you have to make a very quick decision sometimes, whether you're going to evacuate people or you're going to leave them in place, and so on and so forth, because you know, the forest fires that we deal with currently in the climate that we're in, where there's extremes in climate, local weather patterns, those decisions have to be made very quickly. And I've done that many times over the 28 years that I've been involved in band government. And I think that the main the main concern that they have is that, if the forest fire were to take out a community, that would be a disaster. Losing their homes, losing their abilities to practice their traditional culture, like hunting, fishing, trapping. When a fire goes through, all those cultural practices are impacted, and that's the other concern that they have. Is the impact, the immediate impact of fire on their traditional territory, and so we've had to make those decisions fairly quickly. And a lot of times, I had to make a decision whether to allow the firefighters to do a backburn, to take out a whole section beside a community like here in Deschambault, which means destroying a whole swath of our territory to protect our community. And we did that. We had to do that to prevent the fire from coming right into the community. So, those are things that I've been experienced with. And like I said before, prior in the introductions, that I had the opportunity to work with some very good firefighters in environment. Well, they've changed their name so many times, I don't even know what to call them now. Natural Resources Canada, or Department of Natural Resources. What is the other one? Saskatchewan Environment Resource Management. What are they now?
CCI. I don't know what they are now.
They're the
Mo.
SPSA now.
SPSA. They used to be MO, right? Ministry of Environment.
Yeah.
Yeah. But since it's Premier Mo now, so they had to change to what?
It's SPSA.
Oh,
Sask
SPSA.
Public Safety Agency.
Yeah. So anyway, I've had, like I said, opportunities to work with individuals that are very skilled in what they were doing, and that's basically what we need to do, is that we have to have knowledgeable people that know how to deal with forest fires in a manner that's more appropriate to protecting our communities and our traditional areas. So I'll leave it at that, Alex.
Sure. Well, I was just going to actually ask you for a follow-up. What would you, what sort of things do you feel would be more appropriate for your territories?
I think number one is that we have to involve our own people in suppression of forest fires, or management, if you want to use that term. But managing a forest fire that's out of control is kind of impossible. And especially if you're dealing with extreme conditions of wind and heat, the two things that lead to a wildfire that's out of control. But right at the very beginning, if you were to react very quickly and suppress that fire and keep it to a minimum in terms of damage and area of burn, then I think you need to get the local Indigenous people involved. Because, as you said before, they know the land, they know, their traditional area very well. They know the lay of the land and what fuels are there, and what territories are going to be impacted, what animals are going to be impacted, medicines, all that. They have all that knowledge. And so if we do that, given that they have to be certified to fight a forest fire, that kind of makes me chuckle, because I fought fires for 20 summers without a certificate. And then they brought in that program where you have to be certified. So after 20 years of forest fire fighting, I didn't know what I was doing after 20 years. So I couldn't fight forest fire after that because I didn't have a certificate. However, that is beside the point. I think that our Indigenous people, our local people in the area, know a lot about forest fire fighting. A lot of the elders that are still around know a lot of how they used to do forest fire fighting. And I remember when I started fighting fire, I think it was one of the first ones I went to was Pasquaca River. And we had the old boys there. They're all gone now, but they fought fire in the way that they chose to fight that fire. And one of them was late Oscar Beatty, my uncle, and a few other ones, Matthew Weninu, a lot of people that were very knowledgeable. And you can't do that these days because it's against policy and operational health and safety. And that we fought fire at night, believe it or not. But they made sure that we did it in a safe way. Because if you fight fire at night, once you extinguish the fire line, then it's pitch dark. And you could, if you're not careful, you can come to some harm, especially if you walk into a tree and you don't have glasses on. And poke your eye out. But they knew what they were doing. They marked everything and they kept everybody close. And we were able to hold the line there where we were, because we fought it at night and we put the fire line out, and so that's where it stopped. You know, those kind of things that they used to practice aren't there anymore. And I always take issue with operational health and safety when it comes to firefighting, because they have to, regardless of the fact that they go through the same process 1,000 times, where you learn how to approach a helicopter, get into the helicopter, buckle yourself in, all these safety regulations that they fill you in on every morning, same thing over and over. By the time you're ferried to the fire, it's 11 o'clock in the morning, and in the summertime, the fire is already up in the trees. So there's really no point to it. Back when we were fighting fire, we had cabs right next to where the fire was, and we would get up in the morning. Well, at least we were told to get up in the morning, and we got up. 5 o'clock in the morning, we'd be on the fire line by 6 a.m. when the fire was on the ground, because then the ground crews have a chance to control that fire and to extinguish it. But nowadays, it's helicopters and water bombers that are expected to put out a fire, but you can't put a fire out with just air attack. You have to have people on the ground to dig it out. And that can only happen early in the morning when it's cool. That's the only way you can put out a fire. But you know, if you're trying to manage a fire, good luck. Because once it gets away, it gets away. There's no way you can manage it. Not that and I've seen a lot of big fires that they've tried to manage. First of all, they monitor a fire from the time it's maybe 100 by 100 feet, and then they keep monitoring it till it's so many acres, and then they get into a condition where, you know, there's high heat and high wind, and it blows up on them, and then they try to manage it, which is impossible. I've seen that repeated too many times. I think there has to be a change in the way that forest fires are addressed. And there has to be an acknowledgement that we are now in a time of weather extremes, whether it's extreme heat or extreme, rainy weather. You know, like that can happen as well. But we move from one extreme to another. In fact, we're going to move from +1 on Friday to -29 at night. Now that's extreme, according to the Weather Network, anyway. But anyway, those are my comments, Alex. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks, Senator Beatty. And yeah, and just if folks. I know there's a lot of agency folks and wildfire management personnel who are here today, and it sounds like a couple of recommendations Senator Beatty is making right off the bat is not the certification. There can be a lot of qualified First Nations firefighters, but if they don't have the certification, then suddenly they can't get fired. So I think recognizing that their existing experience is of huge importance for sure. And then also the different firefighting techniques, firefighting at night. I know with our research group that I helped facilitate at PAGC, we did a ton of focus groups with different long-term First Nations firefighters, and everyone says need to fight fire at night or late evening into the night kind of thing. So that's just some of the strategies. Robin, we'll bring it over to you. You mentioned some of the recommendations that came out of the PAGC Wildfire Task Force. And I think that sort of lends to what Senator Beatty was saying with the camp model and that kind of thing. Can you just talk a bit about some of the recommendations you made?
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, one of the things that we wanted is to go back to the 10-man crew system, and also the line camps. They gave us the 10-man crew, 2 cooks and 8 firefighters, 1 cook and cook's helper. So that added up to 10. But you still only have 8 firefighters. They fell short on the camps, like the remote camps that we're used to in the 80s and 70s, or probably even later than that. They wouldn't budge on that, and it's not because of the operations, like the people that are directly working on fires. It was occupational health and safety within the province that pretty well took over the operations within the fire line, and a lot of it didn't make sense. It still doesn't make sense. And the people that are making these decisions they have different specializations. None of them are specialized in firefighting. So that's one of the issues that's ongoing right up to today, that we need to go back to the remote camps, and hopefully we get some word today. We're inviting the folks here, the local authorities here, from the fire cache here. So they'll do a report for us on Friday in Stanley Mission. If we can fit them into the agenda. I think the agenda's pretty well full already. We have other meetings that are part of this firefighting report. So yeah, there's some recommendations that we made that are still pending. We're still waiting for the response on some of those things. And one of them is that 10-man, remote camps. I'll reiterate something that I just heard that Peter talk about, is those central camps. Those central camps are, yeah, they're good in some way, but there's more negative that come out of them than anything positive. The remote camps the central camps are quite a ways from the fire. So it takes quite a while for them to get the firefighters out there, the boots on the ground. So the other things that we have to contend with is they have to feed everybody before they leave. right? And that takes a long time. And also, it's uh, preparing their food for them for the day. That takes quite a bit of time. So like what Peter said was that's really puzzling is nothing gets started until about 11 o'clock. 11 o'clock, your fire is already out of control. It's up the trees and a ways from where it stopped the day before. So there's no correlation there between occupational health and safety where there's a medium and everybody's satisfied with it. There just isn't. The occupational health and safety get priority. So they're getting into the operation side of things. And I think we need more people like Walter to speak up on this whole issue of operations, because it's not working. And I think you're putting the firefighters in harm's way when you start fighting fire at 11 o'clock. You might as well just keep them in the camp because they can't do anything. You take them to the fire where the fire's hot at that point, they'll end up in the water, and that's where they'll just sit around there. So there's got to be a happy medium here, and I think we can find that as Indigenous people, because we have lots of knowledge going into these strategies of fighting fire, and I encourage the people that are listening to talk to your local elders and get them to speak up on this, because it's when occupational health and safety put their foot down, they're that's it. Nothing can be done. It's their way or the highway. So the other discouraging thing about that is people don't want to fight fire just because of that. There are times when there's the odd number of firefighters out there that just want to go out there and say that they've gone out and fought a fire, but those are the ones that come home the next day. They can't handle it, or they just don't want to. So some of that stuff came from there, but it's, not everybody's like that. There's a lot of people that go out there that want to learn about fighting fires and being in that culture. There's like a separate little culture there when you're in camp. Everybody's getting along. In the evenings, we're playing games, and we're in bed by 8 o'clock and ready by 5. But with occupational health and safety, those things are gone. So I would encourage the audience here today that there's change that has to come from the grassroots. It can't always be these people that live in safety in the cities where they don't really have a vetted interest in 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 how you put out a fire. Most of them don't know. They don't know fire behavior. But I think Cliff would be able to answer that. Is the fire behavior is becoming a part of this putting out fires, and I believe that's where the occupational health and safety folks need to get educated around fire behavior. They can make better decisions once they know the fire behavior. I'll stop there for now.
Thank you, Robin. So yes, we only have about 5 or 6 minutes left. One thing I did want to get to before we finish off is sort of a discussion about how does wildfire impact Indigenous rights? So when you think about treaty rights or inherent rights, why is thinking about wildfire important for that? Whether it's with the right to burn or if it's going out on the land in areas that have previously burned. I was wondering if maybe Senator Beatty, you could just get to that about why wildfire is important to consider when thinking about Indigenous rights.
Yeah, there's the impact on inherent rights. Inherent rights, of course, are those rights that all First Nations, Indigenous people have prior to contact. The inherent right to self-government, self-determination, the inherent right to practice our culture, our way of life. That's the inherent right to the land as well. And you know, the impacts on inherent rights are, there can be positives, but mostly negative on the right at the very front end of a forest fire. Because when a fire goes through, it takes out everything. You're not going to be able to practice your hunting and gathering there for some time. Medicines take time to rejuvenate and to for the regrowth of those in certain areas. And but over a period of time, like the other thing is you can't trap in there. You know, you can't really hunt in there right after. But you know, by the next year when a new growth comes in, especially in our area, when a new growth comes in, then it seems to draw the moose and you know, if there's any, not the caribou. The caribou won't come in. Mostly moose comes back after a forest fire a year after. But as far as the other small animals, then they'll come back later as well when the new growth starts to come in. Because it's mostly willows that come in first before the larger trees come back. But you know, over a period of time, you know, it all depends on which area you're in as well. You know, we're up in the Precambrian Shield where the soil depth is very thin in a lot of areas. And so a forest fire goes through there, it takes out all the soil. And if there's any what we call white moss or caribou moss, then you know that gets taken out, and the caribou move off to different areas where they can find food. Which and the white lichen that grows on the ground is their major source of food. So the hunting part of it is immediately impacted. The gathering is immediately impacted. Those inherent rights. There are treaty rights as well, and the treaty rights, of course, flow from the treaties that were signed, and which are, you know, part and parcel of the treaties and what they meant to our First Nations people. And so those are some of the things in terms of treaty rights that are impacted as well, because the treaty right to hunt, fish, and gather, and so on and so forth, and trap are written into the treaty. And the inherent rights, of course, are protected under in the Constitution under Section 35, and are entrenched in the Constitution. But of course, as I said before, it's heavily impacted our inherent and treaty rights, especially when these large fires that go through. But also, on the other hand, there's something to be said about if you were to be able to control fire, as Solomon had said, you know, that there's good that can come out of that in certain areas. And I believe that if there was a way to control a fire, to take out areas of older forests where there's a lot of fuel, you know, if you can do that, then you know, maybe that's something that can be looked at, a controlled fire, to take out the fuels that are there that may contribute to a forest fire running rampant through a huge swath of land. And that happened here. How many years ago? That was about 3-4 years ago. A fire burned it from Pelican Arrows all the way to the Manitoba border. And that fire started out as being a very small fire. So I think that, you know, if you can do that, then, you know, you're going to minimize the impact on Indigenous inherent and treaty rights. To you know, it impacts our culture, our ability to practice our culture. And but you know, in times past, and I'll speak to this a little bit, when weather conditions were not that extreme, you could count on certain periods during the summer where you would see the rains coming to control the fires. And Indigenous people knew the weather patterns very well. And if there was a forest fire, they didn't really try to address that. And they would, being nomadic people, they would move away from that area and then come back a year or two later, because they knew that the rains would come and to put that fire out. But today, as I said before, we're living in extreme weather, and firefighting practices have to be resilient enough, or the people that make those decisions on how to address forest fires, whether it's to manage or to suppress, they have to be resilient enough to recognize that and to change firefighting practices to better accommodate those things that we speak of. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Well, I guess we're at the 2 o'clock hour. Heather, should we wrap things up?
Yeah, so we will have to wrap things up. Just it's within the hour, but I really wanted to say thank you very much to Robin, Walter, Peter, and Solomon, and to yourself, Alex. I really appreciate you guys coming in and sharing your experience and capturing a bit of how things have changed for you guys. I'm hearing about starting in the, you know, what firefighting was like decades ago in the 80s for you, and then the years that have followed. So I want to take the opportunity again, all four of you, Solomon, Peter, Walter, and Robin, to say thank you very much. Thank you for opening with the prayer, and Alex, thank you for moderating. And I think it's been interesting to people to hear what you've had to say. And I know that you guys have more to say. We had a couple more questions lined up, and we've run out of time. So thank you for organizing, Alex. And this has been our national conversation with Indigenous fire practitioners.
Well,
so I'm going to stop the. Sorry, Alex, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say thank you. Thank you so much for having us. And yeah, I hope that this can lead to more conversations of agencies partnering with Indigenous nations and ensuring that yeah, Indigenous nations just need to be more involved in fire response, because, you know, for the reasons outlined by Senator Beatty, sovereignty and the right to land, as well as, like, we're in this time of climate change and we need to work on this. So thank you again for.
And I think from all of you guys, there was the encouragement for people to reach out, like from the agencies. There is the encouragement that to the audience members in the agency that Indigenous people are looking for the engagement, and you know, it is up to us to reach out and to involve people in really like the management of their land.
All right, well, thanks so much.
Thank you.